And clearly we see that the ruling class in this country is based on the proposition of using wedge politics, whether it's religious bigotry or the so-called immigration issue. They say that there are statistically about 13 million undocumented workers in America. And the question that we as communists will have is that these people are part of the working class. They will not be deported back to their countries of origins. There is still a need for them in this country by the capitalist class. Now, the wedge issue to rile people up and to build racism, to divide people, is going to continue. But as progressives in this country, we have to fight and find some type of way to emphasize the unity between documented and undocumented workers. The same as around this whole question of whether same-sex people could marry or not. Very clearly, this is a wedge issue, which the ruling class has used. And in the issue, I've never had a right winger convincingly tell me how would this affect them. Someone of the same sex marrying someone of the same sex, how would it affect them? Because it wouldn't. So without this unity, without a unified working class and its allies, the decline of this country will continue. And at this particular time, we can talk about the issue of fascism in this country. Now, I'm not saying the Bush administration is a fascist administration. What I'm saying is sure is authoritarian. As we go, as the years have gone by, we've seen one democratic right be under attack by the Bush administration, one after the other.
Yeah.
At this particular time, any American citizens could be picked up, identified as a terrorist, and go through a process which it could take you years to legally get from under this.
Or maybe never.
Or maybe never.
The enemy combatant.
Exactly.
Class. Yeah.
Exactly. We are at presently engaged in a war in Iraq, which I think most of Americans in the last congressional elections made their voices very clear, and that is we want the U.S. out of Iraq, not next year, not 2 years ago, but now. We want to see an increase in the minimum wage. We want to see all the tax giveaways to the rich roll back. We want to see health care. We want to see all of these things. But to achieve all of these things, you really do have to have a militant, united working class.
And I think these are hard times, too, because as Comrade Harry alluded to, there is very divisive propaganda and ideology which is being whipped up at this point in history. The whole move of the Christian fundamentalist right, and by that I don't mean people who read the Bible on Wednesday night. I mean people, who really do believe that George Bush is Jesus, that George Bush will bring Armageddon. These scary, sick, fundamentalist types who engage in blowing up abortion clinics, who support a return to slavery, who preach the most craven, decadent morality, and practice the most degrading. They may make me angry, but there is a section of our working class too that falls prey to these elements, and our task as well is to, continue to build the working class movement in a way where they stop, where there's a way they can be won over somehow. And I don't think we have the answers of the complete answers on this. I think struggle and history and time will tell, but part of working class unity will have to be won through these battles as well.
I feel like the Communist Party and socialists in general do a good job of addressing class issues. I think that communism, socialism has a very well-developed class analysis and a historical perspective on class struggle that most Americans, I think, deeply need. I think they lack that and need that in order to really understand their own world and what's happening. But I'm very genuinely asking the question, what about the environmental crisis? What about global warming, climate crisis? Is this something that the working class, communists and socialists can address, and if so, how?
Is it a working class question? Global warming, the rape of our planet, is it a working class question? I would answer unequivocally yes. People who have maybe read Gus Hall's books, his name was mentioned earlier, know that he posited that it would be the working class that suffers first and foremost from the attacks on our environment, from the corporate plunder of our resources. Certainly things like environmental racism become more in your face. Is it a working class issue? Absolutely. Will socialism have to take on these issues? I believe absolutely. Is it a question for labor? Absolutely. Is it a question for the movements? I believe absolutely. In fact, I believe it was Chavez of Venezuela who looked at the environmental crisis and argued that it made the necessity of socialism more imperative.
So Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, president of Venezuela, is saying that socialism is necessary to deal with the environmental crisis?
I believe I read that in a extract from a speech of his, yes.
Yeah, I think the point that that Michael is trying to make is that throughout the history of socialism, socialism has always had to be refined and reflect the day, the present, not the past. The socialism that Chavez is talking about, the socialism that we would like to build in America, will have to be a sustainable socialism. Now, Marx talked about a socialism of abundance in the Communist Manifesto. And at his particular time, that really made a lot of sense, because the whole question of need of the entire working class at that particular time was a valid need. Okay. Now we're seeing that resources are not infinite. Okay. So we have to have a sustainable socialism. In other words, what we mean is that it will be an abundance, but collectively we're going to have to determine what type of abundance it is. It can't be the type of socialism that we've seen built in Eastern Europe, where they just expanded the productive forces. We have to build something a little different, in the sense that the whole question of, is there enough oil? Is there enough coal in the world? Is there enough food for everyone? All of these are valid issues, and they have to be taken in consideration. Very clearly, when I say socialism has two criteria. One, it has to be democratic. Secondly, it's going to have to be based on need. Okay, when you talk about need, what are you talking about? Well, we're talking about what are the basic needs that people need in society at this particular time, where they would have a quality of a lifestyle. We know people need housing. We know people need culture. We know people need water. We know that people need some comforts